Lindsay, I think the key word here is estranged, because the reality is, as much as I agree with you that there is a real undercurrent of just rejecting anything that even looks like authority or structure or elders. I mean, all of that is very real, but I don't think it's without cause. If you look at what's happened over the last 20-ish years, all of the major institutions that were supposed to be the safe places for young people to look to for guidance, for leadership, for direction, for certainty. All of these institutions are failing en masse. I mean, you have the Catholic Church that just had $1 billion settlement for abuse rampant abuse that's been going on for forever. If you look at the evangelical church, I mean, it's been scandal after scandal after scandal of, the people who are the most visible, the most prominent, just one scandal after another. Then you have all of these, Christian celebrities, right? Deconstructing, coming out and saying, everything that I was taught was a lie. And, once I started kind of like thinking about it, questioning it, it just became apparent. And now I'm into spirituality, and so it's just been this thing of just a breakdown. It's happening everywhere. You have the same thing happening in government, happening in our economies, the levels of corruption in all of these different institutions is getting exposed left and right. And so, you have to take a step back and say, is it any wonder that these young kids are saying, yeah, I have no interest in any of this. I have no interest in participating in your systems. I have no interest in your traditions. You can't be trusted. Like, quite frankly, I think the generations that came before have kind of earned it. I mean, just look at the divorce rate. It's like, I'm not saying that divorce isn't something that happens and that there aren't circumstances where, it is what it is, right? But there's a whole lot of people out there that are coming together, making kids, and then deciding, well, I just am not happy in my relationship anymore, and they're blowing up their families without any consideration whatsoever for what the effect that's actually going to have on the children, and not sucking it up and staying committed to their partner, at least until their kids are old enough to move out and be well-adjusted adults before they do it. They're cutting bait and saying, oh, I'm just not happy, so I'm out. So while I agree with you that there is a real undercurrent of rejecting authority in the culture in general, I also feel like a lot of that, unfortunately, is kind of earned by the behavior of many of the adults that have come before, and quite frankly, by the example that a lot of these adults are setting. I mean, as funny as it was, when I saw a senator say, "Let's go, Brandon," on the Senate floor. At least I'm pretty sure it was the Senate floor. It might have been another government gathering, but either way, it was a place where decorum is expected. It's appropriate. It's necessary. I mean, in these environments, these are the places where the decisions that are going to affect the actual livelihoods of our country, of our citizens, are being made. And we're saying things like, "Let's go, Brandon," which is just an absolute loss of decorum at the highest possible levels. And of course, I mean, you've got Trump in office right now, which is a whole other thing unto itself. Whether you agree with his policies or disagree, I don't have a stance on this. But I am, at the same time, I have to say, like, again, the loss of decorum at the highest possible levels, particularly in our country, is a contributing factor to this problem. I talk to business owners all the time, and they tell me, oh, these kids don't want to work, and they've got this attitude of, they expect everything for nothing, and just all this other stuff. And like I said, I don't disagree with some of what they're saying with regard to this attitude, but man, I don't think the way that we get to the other side of it is by the adults standing on their high horse and proclaiming how these kids need to change their expectations, and they need to respect their elders and all this other stuff. It's like, and I'm not saying that's what you're saying, I'm just kind of acknowledging the broader thought process here. but I think that the adults in this area need to have some humility and need to approach this thing with the understanding that there's a lot of trust that has to be rebuilt, and whether we caused it or are just the recipients of it, because I grew up in the same time a lot of these young kids are growing up in, and we experienced a lot of the same stuff, watching these institutions fail. So I mean, but regardless, like, I'm 40 right now, which means my next 10 to 15 years I'm going to be in positions of authority, and I got kids and all those things, and so I have to recognize the fact that there's a whole bunch of kids out there that are coming up in this environment, and we've got to set a better example. Like, those of us that are in a position to set these examples, we have to set a better example for these kids. We've got to suck it up and stay together in these marriages when it's hard. Again, at least until they move out. If you're committed to divorcing, it is what it is, right? That's between you and God. But at least have the decency to not put your kids through your mistake, right? And that's the thing. Like, that's the real issue. Is like the adults, those of us that are adults right now, we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard, and we've got to set a better standard of expectation for these kids, and show that the generation that's coming up is actually trustworthy, and that these institutions don't need to all be torn down. Institution is not bad. It's bad leadership is bad. Anyway, all that to say, any adults that are watching this, man, we've got to take the attitude and the position of compassion and understanding for these kids. Coming at it from a position of kind of arrogance or a position of superiority, that it's like, well, no, these kids just need to respect their elders, right? And just that mentality is not going to work. It's not going to help anything, because these kids have seen nothing but adults failing miserably in every possible way, acting selfishly, acting just treacherously in some cases, and so there's been just a horrific example set for these children, and the only way that gets corrected is by adults coming along and setting a different example, and showing that it's not all adults, it's not all authority, it's not all institution, it's not all structure. All of these things are not corrupt. There were just corrupt people in them.